Xavier.
My mom says Xavier.
Xavier.
So it's the French pronunciation, but it's fine.
I was pretty far from right there.
Yeah, it's pretty good. All right, well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I normally do this talk, I'm an architect from background, and I normally do this talk in front of an architecture audience. Not today, more tech audience, so I'll start with giving a one-slide overview, the fastest kind of overview of Foster+Partners work. So we've been around for more than 40 years, I think 45 years now, and we work on a huge variety of projects. And as you can see here, we work on skyscrapers, airports, cultural buildings like this one, but we also do stuff like boats, yachts, all the way to furniture and door handles. So there's a huge variety of scale that we work on. Of course, we're an international firm. We're mainly based in London. I think 90% of our staff is based in London, over 1,000 people. But our projects are worldwide, as you can see on this slide. Which means it's quite interesting because you design for places that are very different backgrounds, socially, culturally, politically, but also different climates. So designing buildings in different climates and different parameters, and different environmental parameters, makes quite different buildings each time, geometrically different. So these are a few buildings, all built in very different climates. And we adapt our buildings to the climates. Of course, this building here, the Sage, is built and designed specifically for this location. You know, we have a huge window in the front. We have this kind of semi-public space. This building is built for the climate here. And this building is actually quite interesting for me because this building was actually one of the reasons why a team within Foster+Partners was started around 15 years ago. And it was a quite small specialist team, and they're called the Specialist Modeling Group. And to describe it, we're kind of an in-house consultancy, an R&D setup. We're about 18 people, and we normally deal with buildings that are complex in geometry, but also complex in building physics. How's the team built up? Well, it's a bunch of architects, like myself, but within there, we have different other professions. So it's a very multidisciplinary team. So we have architects, but also computer scientists, mechanical engineer, aerospace engineer, acoustician, mathematician. We even have a fine artist. And you might think, like, how can you have a team with all these very, very different backgrounds? How do they work together? Well, a very simple answer is they all speak the same language, and there's a language of code. So all of these people are very good in their field, but are also really great coders. And there's about 3 of them already wrote their own software before they joined the team. So they look at the world all in the same way, right, through code. Now, the project I'm going to talk about today was the first project that that team did. Like, normally, we consult the architects and the engineers within our firm. This was a project that we were able to do on our own. And the reason for that is that it was quite complex because it was on the moon. So we had the European Space Agency approached us and asked us if we could look at lunar habitation. How could we deal with that? We knew we can't do that on our own. We better get a consortium together. So we started working with Alta, which is a space engineering firm, with the Scuola Superiore in Pisa, which is the robotics department there, and also with D-Shape, which is a company that makes very large 3D printers. So, but this project was all in kind of a timeline at that stage for the European Space Agency to go back to the moon. They want to have a lunar lander first, then a lower lunar orbit station, and then the first lunar habitation. So we're kind of around 2030, 2035, quite long ahead in time. What we often do is, when we design in a place that we haven't been before, you look at what kind of architecture is there. What is the existing structures? It's not much. We've been there about 40 years ago, and It was more a bit of a camping trip because we only stayed about 3 days. Right? So there's not much that we could relate to. But, so existing technology, so what is out there? Well, there's one thing, kind of habitation unit out there, of course, is the International Space Station. So we start looking at that. How does that work? And another one, which doesn't exist anymore, which is the Mir space station. Oh, by the way, somebody last night asked me what my favorite building is, and I couldn't answer that question. And it's actually, I know it, it's actually this one. It is the Mir space station. It doesn't exist anymore, but as a 12 or 14-year-old, I was able to see one of the training module. So they had that in a museum, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm very happy to be able to kind of like keep working in that field now somehow. When you look at a space station, they are built up of a few elements. And they're very simple. They're all cylindrical elements, and they're all stuck together, an assembly of these cylindrical elements. And this is, for example, the the Columbus module of ESA, their lab, part of that International Space Station. And why do these things look like a can, like a cylindrical can? Well, there's the maximum amount of volume you can get on top of a rocket, on top of an Ariane 5 rocket. So there's the kind of volumes you can deal with. Of course, when you look within this space station, this is kind of the spaces you get. Right? It's very technical, it's very cramped. People live up there for months. Not the greatest kind of environmental spaces to live in. And if you see, there were quite a few up there. Imagine, being in these spaces. Also, the astronauts, what I've learned is they don't change clothes too often. So they wear the same underwear for about 5 days, and their normal clothes, they last for weeks. So being in the same space, not that great. You want to have bigger spaces. So the cost of bringing anything to the moon or into orbit is huge. It's about $200,000 to bring 1 kilogram to the moon. So weight is very important. How can you get something light, and how can we get something that expands more than just the kind of the little cylindrical volume? So we started looking at inflatables. This is kind of a nice inspirational image. It's an art piece by Thomas Saraceno, an inflatable. What could we do with that? That could be interesting, because you could compact space, and it's very light. So if you bring an inflatable, compact inflatable into a rocket up to the moon, then we expand it, would be kind of interesting. Of course, with all great ideas, we weren't the first one to think of that. There's a company out there already, Bigelow Aerospace, which is now developing a concept that was earlier designed by NASA, which were inflatable space modules. So it does make sense to do this. There is even now already an inflatable satellite. This is by Bigelow Aerospace, their first inflatable module that is now in orbit. It's been up there for a few years now. So, cylindrical volumes, inflatables. We thought that's kind of an interesting thing to work with. So we decided for our design, we said, okay, we start with a kind of a hard shell cylindrical elements, which is all the technical bits in, all the life support is within that module. And out of that, we have an inflatable, so the living and the working spaces. Now, the moon is an extremely harsh environment, right? And that space station, or the moon base, has to be protected from that environment. So have a little look what kind of environmental factors there are that we have to deal with, have to design around. First of all, solar radiation, right? Solar radiation from the sun, radioactive radiation. We have to protect the astronauts from that. We don't need that on Earth because we have a magnetic field and we have an atmosphere. On the moon, you don't have that. So how do we protect ourselves from this? Now, protect yourself from this solar radiation, you have to know where is the sun when you're on the moon. Well, it also depends where you're going to be on the moon. Let's kind of put ourselves to the equator of the moon. If you're standing there, where will the sun be? Well, this particular thing that the moon always shows the same face to the Earth. There's always there's the dark side of the moon, the bit that you never see. So you always see the same side of the moon. So it rotates around the Earth like this, which means if I'm standing on the equator, my day on the moon will be that I'll see the sun rising and midday, and then it goes down, and that will last for 14 days. So a moon day is 14 Earth days, and then it'll be dark for 14 days. It's not a great place to be. So if you go to the South Pole, your day is slightly different. You have the sun on the horizon, and it will stay on the horizon for 28 days, and it just goes around you 360 degrees. So you always have sun. So we thought, well, that's kind of an interesting location. So we actually have a site for our moon base, which is here. It's on the side of on the edge of the Shackleton crater. And don't get it wrong, this is not a kind of a tiny little edge. This is about 50 kilometers by 50 kilometers, and the Shackleton crater is about 4 kilometers deep. This is actually an analysis we did of the terrain. And if you look at the red spots is where you have eternal light. So you have the sun being on the horizon, and you always see the sun. The blue spots is when you have eternal darkness. And this is where we think we'll actually find water. So it's kind of a good place to be. You actually have always sunlight and you have water. Second environmental factor that we have to protect ourselves from is meteorites, meteorite impacts. Surface of the moon looks like this because there's, again, no atmosphere. Meteorites won't burn up in the atmosphere. They will hit the moon surface. Now, these hit yourself at quite a high speed. If you look at a bullet goes at about 1,000 meters a second. A meteorite that will hit the moon surface, right, will hit it at 18 times that speed. So it's going to hurt. So we need to protect our moon base from this. Then extreme temperatures. Now, we're kind of used to building a firm in very kind of extreme temperatures and environments. You know, this is our Masdar project in Abu Dhabi. The desert is plus 50 degrees felt temperature. So we kind of design in particular ways there. Also, this is our Konshatir Entertainment Center in Astana in Kazakhstan. Again, it goes to minus 35 degrees. Again, you have to design in a very particular way. But how do we design on the moon, where it can be plus 100 degrees to up to minus 160 degrees, right? Huge temperature differences. So this is the moon base. So we have, what you actually want to do is you would want to dig a massive hole, dig yourself in, right? Because a cave would actually be the perfect environment. Of course, bringing huge digging equipment to the moon would be hugely, be very expensive, so we can't do that. Very complicated as well. So we thought, well, actually, let's build a dome around our moon base. One of the things we often also do in the firm is we use local materials. You know, if we build something in Switzerland, we're going to use wood. Build somewhere else, you use another material. So we thought, well, local materials, that's kind of an interesting thing. What do we have? Not much. We have a lot of moon dust, lots of it, right? Rocks. And we thought, well, okay, let's use it. Let's see if we can use this. So we came up with this idea that we would have a shell, a dome around our moon base that would protect it from meteorites, solar radiation, temperature fluctuations. But to build this, we're going to use 3D printers. And we're not going to use the constant 3D printers that we know of, where we have a machine and the thing that you print is smaller than the machine. We're not going to bring a massive machine to the moon. So we thought we do a bottom-up approach, and we have like an agent-based system where we have small robotic printers, right? And they're quite small, and they go up, they scoop up a bit of dust, and they solidify parts, which is what's happening here. I'll show a video in a minute. It becomes very clear then. But the binder, the agent that actually puts all the dust together, solidifies it, we still have to probably bring from Earth. So we want to kind of minimize that. So the way to do that is we thought, well, how can we make very kind of strong structures, but we're using the least amount of binder? And this time I didn't look at my architectural history books. I went into biology. And we looked at what are kind of interesting structures. Well, bones, for example, birth bones, very light, very strong, or foam structures. So we started looking at these things, and we came up with quite a lot of analysis, and having our material scientists involved, and having our engineers involved. We came up with this idea, which is a closed cell foam structure. And that we would print this, and of course, we then went to Enrico Dini at D-Shape to get a large part printed. So this is about 1.5 meters 3D print, built not with moon dust, but with moon dust simulant, which is volcanic ash that you use. And we kind of made it very similar to what moon dust actually is. So that's the first print that we did. Massive block. As you see, we had to kind of like thicken everything because this was built on the Earth, on Earth gravity, and the actual thing on the moon would be much thinner, right? So we have 1/6 of the gravity on the moon. Then we took this quite serious, so we said, well, let's actually test this now. Can you actually have the 3D printing process on the moon? Does it work? Because another environmental factor is there's a vacuum, right? And we were using a liquid to do the printing process. So this is a little 3D printer. This is kind of a little test case, a little needle in there with a fluid. And this is within a vacuum chamber. So you put it in a vacuum chamber, took 2 days to get the vacuum, and then we see, can we print in a vacuum? So this is the first 3D print in the world done in a vacuum. And we're hugely excited. I know it's a small little thing, but we're massively excited about this. Now, I was going to run on time. Then we also thought about, well, how can we extend this, this moon base? And the idea is that you could actually use the cylindrical volumes, the kind of the hard shell elements as connections between different domes, between different inflatables, and they also would work as an airlock. To finish off, I would love to say this is show you a little video of the project. I'd love to say this is a premiere. You're the first audience to see it, but you're not. Norman showed it last week in New York, but you're the second audience to see this. So there we go.
Planet Earth is protected by the atmosphere, the layer of air and gas that surrounds it. The atmosphere shields the Earth from solar radiation. It keeps the temperatures balanced, and it protects us from meteoroids. The site of our lunar base is the Moon's south pole. Conditions on the Moon are very different from those on Earth. Because the Moon has no atmosphere, there is no protection from solar radiation. The temperature fluctuates, and there is no protection from meteoroids. The lunar lander has detached from the rocket launch and is on a course to Shackleton's crater, the Moon's south pole. Attached to the lander is a cylinder which contains an inflatable dome and 2 robot 3D printers. After the cylinder containing the habitation capsule has been unloaded, a dome is inflated from one end. This provides the support structure for construction, a little like scaffolding is used to build on Earth. The lunar habitation is built by a series of robot-operated 3D printers. At one end, it has a scoop to collect the regolith. In the centre are the containers for the printing material. At the other end, there is a robotic arm with a printing head. The robot collects regolith from the moon's surface. Layers of this moon dust are built up over the dome to create the protective shell. This process takes about 3 Earth months. The shell is made up of a hollow, closed cellular structure. Under a microscope, it would look very similar to the structure inside a bird's bone. Like a bone, it is light and incredibly strong at the same time. When the lunar base is complete, it can house 4 people. Inside the dome, they're protected from solar radiation, meteorites, gamma radiation, and high temperature fluctuations. The original capsule functions as an airlock and technical support module. The skylights draw daylight into the living and work spaces, which are sheltered within a pressurized enclosure. This method is a pioneering advance in space-age construction. At Foster+Partners, we're used to designing for some of the world's most extreme climates. We often use materials found locally to create sustainable buildings on Earth. While the moon is an exciting new territory for architecture, the value of this logic endures.
Thank you.